Cool 98.7, Bismarck Mandan's greatest hits. You're waking up with Wish, and joining me now from the legendary band Boston is Gary Pihl. Gary, thanks for taking the time this morning. How are you?
Hey, real good, Mark. How about you and all the fans out there?
Very, very good, thanks. Well, I love asking musicians this. Do you recall the first memory you have where you realize, yes, I definitely want to work in music?
I think I was pretty young, actually. But I'll tell you one story, and that is I was in a band in 7th grade, and so we played, I was in 8th grade, and we played at the 7th graders' dance.
Okay.
And after the show, so, we're just kids, right? But after the show, a whole bunch of girls came up to us, and they wanted our autographs. So I said, this is pretty cool. I think I want to do this.
Very nice. That's the right way to go about life. I love it. And obviously, throughout your career, you've played in various bands. The one in 8th grade isn't as famous as some of the other ones, but, Crossfire, and, you played with the guys who played in Night Ranger and obviously Boston. But with the former band members you have, do you ever have the opportunity to meet up with them and play with some of the guys you used to play with before Boston?
I do get a chance to see them, and but as far as playing, probably Sammy's the only guy that I would actually get up and jam with, because I've been to his club in Cabo Wabo, of course, a couple times, and sometimes when he comes through town, he'll call me up on stage, and I'll sit in and play with him there. But I still do keep in touch with some of the guys, like, for instance, Johnny Vernazza was in a band back in the 70s, and he went on to play in Elvin Bishop's band. And so he's got gold records on the wall and stuff, and so I see him from time to time. And the other guy I run into sometimes is Johnny Cola, who's the sax player from Huey Lewis and the News. And he and I went to college together. We were both in the choral group there in school. So I get to see him every once in a while.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about how you joined Boston. I know you had met Tom Scholz when he was on tour, but kind of talk about how you ended up joining Boston.
Yeah. So I was in Sammy Hagar's band, and one of the first things that happened when I joined in '77, and Sammy's manager knew Boston's manager, and they said, hey, we're going to have Sammy open up the end of Boston's first tour. So we did about a couple of weeks with them as the opening act in '77, and they liked us and we liked them, and they said, hey, next time we go on tour, we'll have you guys open the whole tour for us all the way across the country. And that's just what we did, 78 through 79. And so we obviously got to know the guys well and became friends with them, of course. And it was a great experience for us, because we went all the way across the country several times and played all over, and again, got to know Boston. And I got to try to pick Tom's brain, because I was always into electronics, and of course I'd be asking him, hey, what's that? What's this thing over here? How do you get that sound? What's this? And so he could see that we both had that interest in electronics together. So, and then in '85, when Sammy left his band, our band, to join Van Halen, Tom called me up and said, hey, I heard you're out of a gig. Why don't you come and help me finish the Third Stage album? There's one more song to be recorded. And so I left from our last show with Sammy, which was Farm Aid 1 out in Champaign, Illinois. Flew directly from there to Boston to start working with Tom, ostensibly just on that one song for that album. But after being there for a couple of weeks, he said, gee, I think we work well together. Why don't you move back here? We'll finish this album, and maybe we'll go on tour and do another album. And I said, sure. So Boston was always one of my favorite bands, so I was so lucky to, again, go from Sammy's band to Boston without, being out of work for a day. I mean, how lucky could a guy get?
Well, that's what I was going to say. What was the time frame between the time Sammy left and Tom called you? Was there any moment of uncertainty for you, or was it kind of instant?
Well, as I say, Tom really only offered me to play on one song. That was his only offer when I,
right.
when I got that first call. And so I was still looking around, because, hey, again, Tom wasn't guaranteeing anything at that point. And so I was definitely still looking around thinking, gee, maybe there's some other group I should join or this or that. And we were actually getting help from our record label, Sammy's record label, Geffen Records at the time. They were trying to hook us up with some other people, in essence, to take Sammy's place, right? Because here's the main singer of the band. It's fine that we've got a great backing band, guitar,
right,
bass, drums, keys, but we needed that front man. So we were definitely looking around. But again, as it happened, Tom said, "Gee, why don't you move back here?" And at the time he said, "I figured it'll take about 4 years to make the next record," because he said, "I'm not going to rush it. I'm going to take my time." And so, in essence, he was offering me a job for 4 years.
Right.
So I packed up the wife and kids and moved to Boston.
Well, I think that worked out pretty well for you. Now, you guys have obviously been performing for a long time. You've done a lot of shows in your life. Is there a particular show that you've done that stands out as maybe the most memorable show that you've done?
Chris, I'd have to say that first show with Boston back in '87. So again, I moved back here '85. We finished the album. The album came out in '86, and we planned on the tour and all that. But we were using all brand new equipment that Tom had designed, and he had his own electronics company called Rockman, and so we were using all Rockman gear, or at least trying to, for the live show. So we put this stuff together, and of course it had never been used before, and our crew guys had never seen this stuff before. So it was a learning experience for all of us, and we were supposed to do 4 sort of warm-up shows before our big one, and that was the Texas Jam there in '87. It's like 100,000 people in the Cotton Bowl, right?
Right.
And so we wanted to warm up at least a little before that one show, right? So we had 4 warm-up dates scheduled to make sure all the equipment worked and the band was sounded good and all that, but we weren't ready. The gear wasn't quite right. We weren't quite getting the right sounds that we wanted to replicate those great tones on the album and all that. And so we were canceling these warm-up dates. And so finally it got to the point we got one show, which was Rochester, New York, before the big Texas Jam show. And we went over to Rochester because it's not too far from Boston here. So we drove over there and got all the equipment working and had a couple days in the venue, and we never were able to play all the songs together at once because something would always stop us. Oh, this doesn't sound right. That we got to fix this and blah blah blah, and it was a technical nightmare. And right up until the time we were about to go on, we weren't sure if the stuff was going to work or not. But Tom gave us the pep talk. He said, "Look, we're going to get out there. We're going to rock. And if the stuff breaks, we'll stop and fix it, but we're going to keep going because we're going to rock in it." So we all went up and, yeah, let's go. And sure enough, everything worked perfectly. And I looked over at my crew guy about halfway through, and he's smiling at me, and I'm smiling back at him like, "Oh, man, this stuff works." And that was a big deal. And, of course, the audience was so loud. They were, like, singing along, with the songs. They were louder than we were. Like, we could barely hear our amps on stage because the audience was so loud. So I got to say that was a real thrill for me.
All right, well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but, you can talk about your first show, and the one thing that we can't talk about yet, which is a good thing, is your last show. And, I mentioned it, you've been doing this forever. Is there an end in sight, or how long do you want to keep doing this for?
And people ask us, well, gee, do you get tired of playing the same old songs or whatever? Well, I would if I had to sit in my living room. But gosh, you get up on stage, and again, people are in the audience are smiling and singing along, and that's just the best feeling in the world. So, yeah, I hope I don't ever have to stop doing that. And because you look at people like Paul McCartney or the Rolling Stones, and they're still doing it.
Right.
So if they can, we can too.
Well, that's great news for you. That's great news for Boston. Boston's going to be at the Bismarck Event Center June 21st. Tickets are available now. Gary, thank you so much for taking the time. It was an absolute pleasure to speak to you.
Well, thanks, Mark, and we're looking forward to coming to Bismarck.